What's up, friends? So today we're going to be talking about Nomadland. So Nomadland is a 2020 film that is currently on Hulu that has a runtime of 1 hour and 50 minutes, and the film is directed by Chloe Zhao. So Nomadland was recently actually nominated and won some Oscars. So already I think you can get a good sense as to the caliber of this movie. But I'll explain a little bit more about the content and what to expect so that you can know if it is the perfect movie for you personally. So Nomadland follows the story of Fern, played by Frances McDormand, who is this lady kind of on a personal self-discovery journey, and she decides to become a nomad, which, to define that, it's essentially somebody who travels the world to various different locations, just exploring the world for what it is. And I think there's currently a negative association with the idea of nomads and wanderers, especially in our contemporary society, just because a lot of people consider them to be, and I hate to use the word homeless, but a lot of them consider to be homeless or a little aimless, no goals or something like that. A lot of preconceptions, and this movie aims to take all of those and shatter them and show you truly what the life of a nomad is and what it means to be a nomad. And I think in that sense, the movie does a fantastic job. Going over the plot real quickly, Fern is the main character, and Fern is this lady who loses essentially everything in the Great Recession, and she decides, you know what, I'm gonna, instead of working again, instead of taking that plunge back into the economy and finding a house and stuff like that, she decides, oh, I'm gonna instead go on a journey through the American West and live in a van, explore the West in a van. And this movie is essentially her journey and all the people she meets, all the lessons she learns, and ultimately she learns what it means to be a wanderer, to be a nomad, you know. She meets a lot of characters, but the movie primarily centers around Fern and her experiences specifically. And the thing about nomads you need to understand is that as wanderers, you're never really going to be stuck in the same place with the same people. And this movie does a great job of showcasing that, because Fern travels from place to place, meeting new friends, sometimes reuniting with old friends. But in essence, the only character that essentially remains through the entire film and we follow through the entire film is Fern. The movie's really dependent on the performance of Fern, and she kills it, knocks it out of the park. When this film originally released, it got some really solid critic reviews. For example, on Rotten Tomatoes, it got a 94%. On IMDb, it had a 10.4 out of 10. And then in terms of Google audience general ratings, 80% of people like this film. So overall, I would say it was looked upon favorably. And further a testament to that is the fact that it got nominated and won a few Oscars as well. So in terms of genres, since this film sort of follows the life of Fern as she embarks on this journey and details her experiences, I would say this film definitely is very much of a personal journey, evolution over time, introspection, understanding kind of film. Like, this film focuses on the character piece, on making you understand what Fern's going through, making you understand the situation Fern's in, and then making you understand the situation of the world around Fern, of the life that Fern is embarking on, and help you understand what it exactly means to be a nomad. And I know I've mentioned that many times before, but as I said, there is a negative connotation to being a nomad at this point in society. Like, people consider it as, oh, that's your last resort. Oh, it's someone who's given up on every other aspect of life. But the truth is, being a nomad is actually a lot more dangerous than you think. It's so challenging. And in order to be a nomad, you low-key have to have everything else buckled down. Dropping everything and deciding to live in a van is a lot more difficult than it sounds. In terms of if you fall in love with the characters, you as a viewer won't need to invest in any of the other characters except for Fern to really fall in love with this film. If you identify with Fern, if you are going through anything at this moment, if you're having a difficult time, if the world is bearing down on you, if the economy isn't good and you're struggling, or honestly, even if you're prosperous and you're doing fantastic, you just don't feel like life is what you wanted it to be, or if you just don't feel satisfied, then you're most likely going to resonate with Fern, because she's very much in the same position. She's in that point in life where she feels like she's gone and done everything, and she could have continued living the life she lived before, but because of the recession, because of all this series of unfortunate events, she ends up with no money, and now she has a choice. Do I go back to what I used to do, or do I embark on this new journey? And she chooses the new journey, and she takes us with her, which is awesome. So with that, you know, you're gonna have to like Fern to like this movie. If you watch the first 15 minutes or first 30 minutes and you hate Fern as a character, which is hard to do because she's very lovable and very open and forgiving and kind and loving. But if you're not a fan of characters that, then would not recommend the rest of the film, because it is very focused on Fern and her development over time. In terms of if the movie holds your attention all the way through, that would depend on the type of person you are. So I'm going to preface this by saying this movie is very much a slow burn, in that it takes its time showing you just exactly how intricate, difficult, complex the life of a nomad is. So in that sense, if you are not at all interested in learning about what nomad lifestyles are, or if you're not at least opening your mind to the idea of learning about nomads, you're not gonna like this film. The film is very much focused around, it has a point, it has a goal to show you the life of a nomad, and it does everything in its power to reach that goal, right? So if you're here to learn at least even a little bit, if you just want to glean like, oh, you know, I've always thought about packing everything up and just hitting the road, then I highly recommend this film, because it'll give you a little taste, a tiny taste into what to expect if you had actually gone through with that plan. If you had actually decided to drop everything and you had moved out, what you would have seen, what you would have gone through. And I think the setting is important. The American West, it's a very beautiful landscape. It's honestly very stunning. So a road trip or being a nomad in that land is gonna be a grand adventure altogether. But beyond that, I think the experiences she goes through and what she learns is so applicable outside of the American West as well, that no matter where you are, if you've had that experience of wanting to go out, wanting to explore, wanting to live in a van, you're gonna resonate with the teachings of this film, and moreover, just the film altogether. I think the best way to put it is it's a very slow-moving, beautiful, and cinematic personal journey across the American West, and you get the awesome opportunity to be there with her as she embarks on this journey. In terms of what's unique about this film, first of all, I'd have to say the plot altogether, right? I mean, I've described a plot so far that I don't think I've ever seen in any film describing the life of a nomad. I mean, there's many films, I think, that speak into the life of traveling in an RV or traveling as a family. But I think what this movie does specifically unique is that it focuses on one character specifically, but beyond that, it's the life of her living in her car, which is a little different than living in an RV. And to go back a little bit, I would say it's very different living yourself, traveling everything yourself, versus traveling with friends or traveling with your family, you know? So in that sense, I would say it's a very novel plot. It's not one that I've watched honestly ever before. In addition to that, it's pretty awesome, very groovy soundtrack. I would say very indie, classical rock, folk kind of soundtrack. A lot of hits, a lot of fantastic music, and everything is very on brand, on theme. So it further pulls you into the world that Fern is living in. In addition, I would say the last unique thing or super awesome thing about this film is that it showcases some truly amazing and beautiful landscapes. You know, America is one of the most beautiful and diverse countries in the world, and you get to see that in this film. And I don't mean diverse in terms of skin color and culture, because I mean, America is a melting pot, but beyond that, the landscapes and the architecture and the world she goes through by traveling from place to place is stunning to watch and very beautiful, very picturesque. So in terms of who would like this movie, I think fans of artistic, slow-moving character pieces are gonna love this film. If you're a fan of films that focus on the evolution of a character over time, films that focus on a new adventure, a new challenge, how they handle that challenge, and their life and journey through that challenge, then this would be the film for you. Fans of movies that focus on personal discovery and the meaning of life are gonna love this film. Continuing on with that, I would say a couple similar films would be movies like Wild or Eat, Pray, Love or Boyhood. Movies that, you know, describe that evolution, that change over time, and describe that story of somebody who is embarking on a new journey, you know, making a transition in life, doing something new in order to learn life lessons, in order to evolve, in order to become a new person, a new, better person. So overall, I would give this film a 3 out of 4. Worth paying attention. It's a great film altogether. If you have any sort of interest in Life of Nomad, or if you have any sort of interest in character pieces that explore evolution over time and growth over time, then I recommend checking out this film, because especially if you're a fan of artistic slow-moving films, you're gonna love this film. So now we'll be moving on to the Parents Guide, where I'll detail a little bit about what kind of content is in this film, in case you want to show it to your kids, or in case you want to watch this with your parents and you want to know whether or not it's appropriate. And then finally, moving on after that, I'll talk a little bit about a couple of the insights and lessons you learned from the film. So now on to the Parents Guide. So this movie is rated R. However, I think it could be easily accessible by a relatively wide variety of audiences. In terms of action, I give this film a 0 out of 5. And that's because there's really no action in this film. There's a couple arguments, but even them are very muted. This is a personal and soulful journey with a lot of kindness and heart and love. And so you'll find a lack of violence in this film that's very fitting and perfect. So if violence is something that you cannot stand, this film could be perfect for you, because there's almost very limited. In terms of sexual content, I'd give this a 3 out of 5. There is a scene with nudity. However, it's relatively brief. It's non-sexual, but it's just a lady like laying in water, kind of like in a bath. There is full nudity, full female nudity, but it is brief and can be skipped. There's also a scene where a woman like pees out in nature, and there's no real nudity, and the scene's non-sexual, but you know, it's still a little... It is a very spiritual journey, so there isn't very much sexual influence or sexual content in this film, so in that sense, that's why I rated it a 3 out of 5. And then in terms of language, I rated this a 2 out of 5. There's a little bit of swearing, as with Nomad Lifestyles. You know, the people she comes across do swear, but it's very limited. There isn't long, prolonged, strong language or anything like that. Relatively mild. There's the B word and the S word, but again, they're brief, they're quick, and none of the characters really focused on swearing. And because of that, right, because it got a 0 for action, 3 for sexual content, and then 2 for language, I think this film can be watched by a pretty wide audience base. I mean, if you're too young, you might not be able to handle the little bit of nudity in this film. But beyond that, I think this is a personal journey that a lot of people can embark on, that a lot of people can learn from. And so I think a wide variety of audiences can watch this film. If language bothers you, there's not much in this film. If violence bothers you, there's none in this film, you know? So in that sense, this is a great film for teens and above, I would say. And I think you can easily watch it with your parents, because none of the content's too crazy. And I think if you do watch it with your parents, there's a lot to learn, and there's something for everybody in the room. So now moving on to a little bit about what you learned from this film. First, most obvious thing you learn from this film, straight up, is that the life of a nomad is not easy. The life of a wanderer, the life of someone who lives in the van is not easy. And I think a lot of people can guess that, like, oh, it probably wouldn't be so easy to live in a van and just travel from place to place. Or maybe you're the type of person who think, oh, living in a van is the easy route. Well, this movie will prove you wrong. Beyond that, even if you think it's relatively difficult, this movie will show you just how difficult it is. You know, it's not safe being a wanderer, especially being a lone female wanderer in the American West. You don't know what type of people you're gonna run into. You don't know what type of situations you're gonna run into, and you have to be ready for everything. Well, you're in the middle of nowhere, oftentimes, with limited resources, and the nearest town is miles away. How in the world are you gonna survive if something breaks down, if something goes wrong, you know? So you have to calculate all that while being a nomad. So it's not a life for everyone. It's not a life that everyone can survive, you know. It's a lot harder than it looks. Beyond that, I think another thing that the movie focuses on and emphasizes is the idea that home is not a location. Home is you and the people you're with. Home is something that you carry around with you. So you might think right now, oh, home is just like where I go and live. But no, your home is the people you're with, the experiences you're with, the ambiance of your home is your home, you know. So for me and for a lot of people living, our home is our house. But for Fern and a lot of people she runs into, their homes are their cars. And by the end of the movie, I think you're gonna learn something even cooler is Fern's home is herself, which is, I think, the final evolution is making it so that no matter where you go, no matter where you're sleeping, you're at home, right? And I think this movie does a great job of showcasing that evolution and showcasing how you can start working on making your home be you and not literally just the abode you live in. Because houses break down, houses change, people move. You have to learn to make wherever you are your home so that you're comfortable everywhere you go. The movie also does a great job of touching on the idea of dreams and how important they are and chasing your dreams till the end. A lot of the characters in this film that Fern meets are on a journey to reach some sort of dream, or on a journey, maybe they failed at their dream and now they're trying to get some retribution. There's a lot of wide variety of characters that Fern meets, and through their experiences and through their knowledge, you kind of get a sense for the importance of having a dream, and beyond that, the importance of having the drive and the ambition to first realize and grab that dream, but then work towards actually making that dream your reality. And then finally, the movie touches on and deals with the idea and the difficulty of dealing with someone who has passed. You know, we all have loved ones in our lives, and it can be very difficult when death comes knocking. And so dealing with loss, dealing with trauma, and dealing with especially personal losses can be one of the hardest things this planet has to offer. So in that sense, this movie does a great job of showcasing a little bit about how you deal with that, what that means, you know, loss and death, and it does a great job of packaging a lot of the best ways to think about loss. Not that there is a good way to think about loss, but it's just, you know, how to remember and celebrate someone instead of letting their death crush you. So the one awesome thing about this film is that almost every scene you're gonna watch is gonna have something new and profound for you to learn from. So in that sense, there's nuggets of truth everywhere. It's very beautifully made and well crafted. So I highly recommend checking it out if you have any interest in anything I mentioned in this review, or if you're just bored. If you have an hour 50 available and you have Hulu, it comes free with Spotify, low-key. So, I mean, if you have Hulu, if you have the time, and you're at least interested in what it means to be a traveler, then I highly recommend this film. Let me know in the comments below if you do end up checking it out. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked any of my content. And until next time, catch y'all later.